According to the Bible, in the first book of Timothy, chapter 6, verse 10, it is written that for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people craving money have wandered from the true faith and have pierced themselves with many sorrows. Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines in For the Love of Money, Lydia Bailey Tweed's story, to examine how Brad McFall and Wright Gammon, partners at Gammon, Anderson, and McFall, got justice for Lydia. Bob and Lydia Tweed were married on December 7th, 1997 in Hogansville, Georgia. This was a later-in-life marriage for each of the parties, and each of them had grown children from previous marriages. Lydia's previous husband had predeceased her, and Lydia had received approximately $400,000 from her previous husband's estate. Bob was a local car salesman in town, and one of his good friends was a local pharmacist named Phil Waldrop, who owned and operated Hogansville Pharmacy. On or about May 29, 2007, Bob Tweed began obtaining fraudulent prescriptions for his wife from his good friend and pharmacist Phil Waldrop. Bob's alleged intent of obtaining these fraudulent prescriptions was to slowly poison and kill his wife Lydia so that he could inherit the $400,000 that she had brought into the marriage. During the following 2-year period of time, Phil Waldrop had filled 89 prescriptions, none of which had been issued by any of Lydia's physicians. These 89 fraudulent prescriptions that were filled resulted in approximately 5,255 various pills being prescribed and administered unlawfully to Lydia Tweed. In May of 2009, Bob Tweed called Lydia's adult children and notified them that Lydia was in very poor health and did not have long to live. When her daughter Rosalind arrived in Cedartown at her mother's house, she immediately sensed a problem. Prescription bottles were scattered throughout the home as she noticed that her mother was in a semi-comatose state. She immediately told her stepfather not to give her mother any more medications, and when he attempted to do so, Rosalind called 911. That was on May 17, 2009. Subsequently, Lydia was transported to Redmond Region Medical Center in Rome, Georgia, and spent the next 10 days in the hospital, where she was ultimately diagnosed with altered mental status secondary to narcotics abuse, drug withdrawal, delirium, malnutrition, opium poisoning, psychotropic poisoning, analgesic poisoning, and suspected spousal abuse. Following an investigation by the Polk County Police Department, Bob Tweed was eventually arrested for 89 counts of forgery and was subsequently indicted by a Polk County grand jury on July 20th, 2010. As of today's date, this case has not proceeded to trial. Lydia now resides in Haywood, North Carolina at an assisted living facility and is still attempting to finalize her divorce from Bob Tweed. It is believed that greed was the underlying reason that Bob tried to kill Lydia by poisoning her. Because as it states in the first book of Timothy, chapter 6, verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. Phil Waldrop continues to practice pharmacy in Hogansville, Georgia, although a formal complaint and investigation has been commenced by the Georgia Board of Pharmacy. The status of that investigation is unknown. Phil Waldrop has not been charged with any crime. Brad McFall and Wright Gammon successfully sued Bob Tweed and Phil Waldrop in order to recover for their wrongdoing. In September of 2011, they won a substantial settlement. Brad and Wright's successful representation of Lydia has earned them the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as some of the best trial lawyers in Cedartown, in Rome, in Georgia, and in the nation. They have seen many innocent and hardworking people become victims, and because of that, they are driven to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. They have built a substantial reputation nationwide by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down. Their amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide their clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Cedartown, Georgia. It is my great pleasure to introduce Brad McFall and Wright Gammon to the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm.
We have a small firm out here in Cedartown, Georgia. We do a lot of trial work. We consider ourselves to be a small town firm that represents people in any manner of problems they might have in their lives. We've been here going back through my father's days and practicing here 55 years or more. We handle a lot of personal injury to workers' compensation to criminal defense. We've been the county attorneys for 40 years. We live in a small town where we see our clients out and get to represent them on a daily basis.
Your dad was your dad a judge?
No, he was a lawyer. He practiced law here. He came back in 1954 and practiced till 1998. He was an old war horse trial lawyer.
Okay, well, I'm glad we have you on the show today. We are discussing a rather unusual case. And before we get into the case, let's talk about your client, Lydia Tweed. Tell our audience who Lydia is.
Lydia Tweed came into our lives in May of 2009. She had married an individual by the name of Bob Tweed, and Bob had called her adult children and asked them to come down here to Cedartown because he felt that she was about to pass. And when his adult daughter came to town, saw the situation that led to the lawsuit that we eventually filed, took her out of the house, got her hospitalized, helped her recover, and we were actually retained initially to file a divorce complaint against Bob Tweed as a consequence of the conduct that led her to our office.
Now, how did it evolve into forgery charges against Bob Tweed and potential criminal prosecution, right?
Yes, well, when the daughter came down, her mother was nearly in a comatose state in a hospital bed in the home. And Bob, the late in life second husband, was over medicating her.
Yeah.
She called 911. They came out and told Bob, don't give her any medication. She caught him shortly after giving her more medication.
Right.
That's when the police were called, and they caught Bob trying to burn boxes of drugs in the backyard.
And prescription drugs were everywhere, weren't there? If I remember correctly, there were like 5,200 pills in her house. There were pills everywhere.
That's right. And what was interesting about that is when the daughter came to the house, she was actually tipped off to the concern by a housekeeper.
Yeah.
There was a daily housekeeper who came in and helped around the house and actually directed Rosalind, the adult daughter, to a closet in the hallway and pointed to a large box of medication. And at that point, Rosalind knew there was a problem.
Yeah. Now, Bob was motivated to over-medicate his wife because of why?
Money.
Money. There was a $400,000 insurance policy that had been paid to Lydia. Her previous husband passed on, right?
That's correct.
And he wanted to get a hold of that, didn't he?
The money had been vested into numerous CDs, and Bob was the beneficiary.
Yeah. I noticed that they got married in 1997, I think. And all of these shenanigans started about 2005, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Because he started over-medicating her. He did it for a period of 2 years, right?
Yes.
Why did he wait so long to start over-medicating her? That question popped up to my mind because he'd been married to her for 8 years.
He won't answer the question.
He won't?
No. There's been a lot of taking the fifth,
Yeah.
refusing to comment.
Now, a lot of people wonder, how could you possibly get your hands on all of this medication? He had a helper, didn't he?
He had a helper.
Who was that?
What we learned is Bob Tweed is originally from Hogansville, Georgia. And in fact, that's where he met Lydia. And Bob Tweed had a very close friend by the name of Phil Waldrop, who was the pharmacist, the primary hometown pharmacist in Hogansville. And after Bob and Lydia had relocated to Cedartown, that friendship continued, and it was Phil Waldrop, who was the helper from out of town, who was shipping the drugs from Hogansville to Cedartown.
So Bob what would he do? Would he call him up and say, send me some more drugs?
Essentially, yes. He would call down, he would ask for the medications that he wanted, and Phil Waldrop, without having received any type of a written prescription or trying to verify who made the call, would send the medication to Cedartown, knowing that it was being shipped and sent unlawfully.
And it was illegal.
Absolutely.
I understand, Wright, that you deposed the pharmacist, Waldrop.
We did.
We have with us today some of those questions you asked him, and I'm going to bring it on the screen right now because some of them are pretty amazing, and some of them were what, by the way?
Yes, whether or not he wanted to explain to the jury in Cedartown why he was acting as a drug dealer, that he was making up the names of doctors to put on phone-in prescriptions. Just every accusatory question to try to give him an opportunity to give an answer.
And I think the one question was, how do you go to bed at night, or how do you sleep at night? What was that question?
Right. I think it was, it's been a little while since I've reviewed the deposition, but it was something along the lines of, you know, how do you sleep at night knowing what you've done to Miss Tweed in a nursing home?
Right. Let's show that, because he answered invoking his Fifth Amendment each time, right?
Correct.
Let's watch that right now.
And you filled a number of prescriptions for Lydia Tweed, is that correct?
Upon the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right not to respond.
And in fact, there's either 88 or 89 fraudulent prescriptions that you filled at Bob Tweed's request, is that correct?
Object to the form. Upon the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right not to respond.
But then Bob Tweed, your old friend Bob, called you back, and you filled a prescription for him on February the 3rd for 120 of these opiates. Is that correct?
Object to the form of the question. Upon the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right not to respond.
And you didn't have any kind of prescription for that, not even a record of a prescription, did you?
Upon the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right not to respond.
And then the very same day, Bob Tweed called you back. And you gave him another 120, is that correct?
Object to the form. Upon the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right not to respond.
I've been asking you a number of questions today to which your response has largely been, not to all questions, but certainly the majority has been that you invoke your Fifth Amendment constitutional rights not to incriminate yourself and thereby refuse to give an answer. Is that correct?
Answer that.
Yes, sir.
Were you negligent in the manner in which you filled these or dispensed the medications to Ms. Tweed?
Upon the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right not to respond.
Did you get my formal objection?
Do you admit here today that you did repeatedly, whether intentionally or negligently, breach the standard of care for licensed pharmacists in the state of Georgia?
Object to the form.
Upon the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right not to respond.
So you won't tell us today whether or not it was just negligence or whether it was intentional?
Object to the form of the question.
Upon advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right not to respond.
No further question.
When you first got this case, it was a divorce case. As you got into the case, you realized, boy, this guy's trying to kill his wife, right? So it became more of it also became a criminal case. What was your reactions? Did you turn this over to law enforcement simultaneously while representing Lydia?
Law enforcement was involved already. As Wright mentioned earlier, when the medication was continued to be given to Lydia, law enforcement was called back in, and Polk County Police Department handled the investigation. So by the time she got to us, the investigation was already active and underway, and in fact, I think Bob had already been arrested for the 89 counts of forgery.
Not for attempted murder, just for forgery, right?
That's correct.
And I think you mentioned to me this case is possibly coming to trial in August, is it?
Yes, yes, it's
Okay.
on.
And still on forgery, still forgery charges. Or you said it's added fraud too?
Well, initially, Steve, when he was charged and indicted by a grand jury, he was charged with multiple counts of forgery and also with elderly abuse. That original indictment was dismissed by the district attorney's office, and he has not yet been re-indicted. So what the actual charges will be at this point is unknown to us.
In a case like this, you got some real challenges, don't you?
We really do.
What were those challenges to try and prove the case for your claim?
Probably the number one challenge was a sweet elderly lady that was in such bad physical condition that it was always questionable how much assistance she could give us. He really hurt her.
And she's still alive today, isn't she?
Yes.
She's in North Carolina, I
Correct.
think. Okay. But when you say he really hurt her, what happened as a result of everything that he did to her?
The drug that caused the greatest problem was corticosteroids, and it caused a loss of the nerves in her extremities.
Really?
And yes,
That's permanent.
yes, she's not been able to get off a walker, and I'm sure never will.
And he was also overdosing. That's a good word to use, right? Overdosing her with lorazepam
Yes,
and other kinds of psychotropic, psychedelic kind of drugs, right?
that's right, and tremendous amounts of Lorcet.
Yeah, prednisone, steroids.
The steroids is what caused the biggest physical damage. The rest of it just kept her in essentially a comatose state.
Is she older than him?
They
you
are
know?
essentially the same.
They're
age.
about the same age.
Right. One of the things that I think helped your case a lot was the fact that you brought in a pharmacist as an expert who could testify to and provided expert testimony, testified to the fact that the pharmacist that was in collusion with Bob Tweed was not acting legally. And you provided us some an affidavit. The expert was Rodney Richmond, correct?
Correct.
And he is a pharmacist that is licensed to practice in what, West Virginia?
Many states.
Many states.
Yes.
Can you tell us the gist of what his testimony was?
His testimony is that there was no way that the pharmacist, Mr. Waldrop, should have ever been filling all of these prescriptions
Right.
over the phone, that it was far in amounts far more than would have been proper
Yeah.
to have been treating someone.
I noticed that oftentimes, and I have the testimony right here, it says Philip Waldrop in Hoganville Pharmacy failed to adhere to the standard of care generally required of licensed pharmacists under like or similar circumstances. That's kind of the essence of what Philip Waldrop did, didn't he?
Oh yes.
Definitely.
This case was settled, I understand, for a substantial settlement. It's confidential, correct?
Correct.
Instead of going to court, you mentioned, I think both of you mentioned, the pharmacist immediately came forward and wanted to talk dollars and settle it right away, didn't he?
Very, very early in the case, we got clear impressions that the pharmacist was interested in resolving the case without a trial.
Okay, and he wanted it to go away, correct?
Yes.
Now, there's an investigation in Georgia right now, looking into his behavior and conduct, correct?
What we understand from the Polk County Police Department is the Georgia Board of Pharmacy has an investigator who is actively pursuing this claim, and from what we understand, Mr. Waldrop will never practice pharmacy in Georgia again.
But he's practicing right now.
But he's still practicing now.
When you're trying to make a decision between whether you should go to trial, and in every case you look at it like you are going to go to trial, or whether you should settle, what's the criteria that you use to make that decision?
Can your clients go to trial emotionally? Will you win? Will you get more? And it's a tremendous emotional toll
Yeah.
on a person to go to trial. A courtroom is a tough place.
Yes.
And in this case, it was really always a question as to whether or not she could stand up to the rigors of walking into the courtroom.
Yeah, because you didn't know how much longer she might be with us.
Yes.
Right?
That's right, and it was difficult for her to travel. She would have to come down from North Carolina.
Yeah.
we didn't have a great deal of comfort that she would be able to sit through a 4 or 5 day trial.
Is she going to have to come from North Carolina when there's a trial against her soon-to-be former ex-husband?
I think they can convict them of some of the counts
Yeah.
without using her.
What is he facing for just 89 counts of forgery?
Well, prescription forgery, they were not all felonies.
Yeah.
It depends on what the substance was that
Really?
formed the basis of the prescription. But each of those felonies carries a 10-year sentence, maximum.
Without guardians like you to watch over these innocent people, and they are innocent, you know, they would be simply out of luck. And I want to thank both of you for being on the program.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.